My name is Liam. Yes, Liam. I've been mistaken for a man in emails, on client calls, even on LinkedIn. Once, someone walked right past me in a cafe during a meeting because they were looking for a Mr. Liam Carter. I just smiled and introduced myself as the woman they overlooked. Maybe it worked in my favor. Maybe having a traditionally male name gave me a few seconds of extra authority before I even spoke. Maybe that's what you need when you're a woman trying to hold ground in rooms built for men, lit for them, and echoing with the sound of their voices. I was the regional growth director of one of the largest enterprise software companies in the Northeast. My team was small but mighty, 28 people, 5 cities, 1 mission build revenue, and we did. In 2023 alone, we generated over $186 million in deals, more than 80% of the company's total revenue. I led negotiations that secured multi-year contracts with 3 of the top 10 Fortune 500 companies. I knew the numbers. I had the receipts. But still, it wasn't enough. Not to them. Not to anyone who actually mattered to me. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. My mother is a retired nurse. My father left when I was 10. I was the youngest of 3. My sister, Elise, married at 24 and has 2 children who dominate every family gathering with photos, awards, and FaceTime interruptions. My brother, Zach, teaches high school history and owns a house near our childhood neighborhood. I, on the other hand, live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. I don't have kids. I've never brought anyone home for Thanksgiving. I'm always working. To them, I'm the odd one out, the career woman, the one who chose her job over her life. You always were intense. My mother once said over Christmas dinner, after I answered a quick call from a West Coast client, just like your father. That was her way of saying I cared too much about the wrong things, that I moved too far, that I worked too hard for something that, to her, was hollow. They never really understood what I do. I've tried explaining churn reduction, SaaS sales pipelines, retention metrics, but their eyes glaze over. To them, I'm just the daughter who shows up in expensive clothes, who sends flowers when she can't make it to birthdays, who never learned how to slow down. And in the company, it was always the same undercurrent, no matter how many bonuses I earned, or how many presentations I gave to packed rooms of executives. I still felt like I was trying to earn a seat I had already built, like I had to work twice as hard to be seen as half as relevant. The new CEO barely looked me in the eye in his first boardroom introduction. He thanked the revenue teams collectively, but never once acknowledged that the growth came from my division. I remember standing there, hands folded, smiling politely while thinking, do I need to bring a spreadsheet to Thanksgiving too? Maybe that's why I kept pushing harder, staying later, hitting higher numbers. I wasn't just competing with quotas or targets. I was competing with their silence. I wanted someone, anyone, to finally say, you did it. You're enough. But they didn't. And that's when everything started to fall apart. It happened at my brother Zach's wedding, February 17th. Before, Charleston, a lavish affair with 280 guests, a string quartet, custom floral walls, and a plated dinner that us over $40,000. I know because I paid for half of it. When Zach first asked for help with the wedding, it came casually over a drink back in September. "We're a little over budget," he said, running a hand through his hair, avoiding eye contact. "Becca really wants this venue. You know how these things are. I just thought, maybe you could cover the deposit. We'll pay you back." The deposit was $12,500. I wired it that night. By December, there were more small things. The photographer's upgrade package, $3,200. The open bar, $100. The custom wedding favors, $2. $600. I didn't ask questions. I just transferred money. Total. I spent just over $35,000. I wasn't just supporting my brother. I was investing in a moment that was supposed to bring us closer. I flew in 2 days before the wedding, alone, as usual. Checked into the hotel, also self-paid, and headed straight to the rehearsal dinner. That's when I noticed something strange. My name wasn't listed on the formal family seating chart. My place card had been moved from the long table where our parents were sitting to one of the outer tables near the DJ booth. I let it slide, maybe a mix-up. I was exhausted from a 5-hour delay out of JFK and just wanted to survive the weekend. Then came the wedding day. The sun was out. Charleston looked like a painting, and I wore a dark emerald gown I had tailored 3 weeks prior. I'd even bought Becca, the bride, a pair of vintage Chanel earrings as a wedding gift. They cost $200. I thought they matched her taste, her ambition. I thought maybe she'd see me. But as the reception began and toasts were made, it became painfully obvious that I wasn't part of the narrative. Zach's best friend gave a heartfelt speech about their tight-knit circle of support. My name never came up. Becca's maid of honor gushed about family stepping up in so many ways. Her cousin got a shout-out for helping with floral arrangements. I got nothing. Then Becca stood, glass in hand, blonde hair curled into soft waves, perfect, curated. She smiled at the crowd and said, "We're so lucky to be surrounded by people who love us for who we are, not for what we can give." A pause. She looked directly at me. "Some people think money buys meaning, but true family shows up in real ways, not just in wire transfers." The room went quiet. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hand trembled as I set down my wine glass. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to disappear. Was that meant for me? Zach didn't stop her. He didn't even glance in my direction. My own brother let his new wife publicly humiliate me in front of 280 guests. Family, colleagues, childhood friends, all of them, pretending not to look while absolutely looking. I excused myself, holding onto the bathroom sink like it was a life raft. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. This was the thanks I got. I opened my phone, pulled up my banking app, scrolled through every wedding-related expense. I calculated the exact amount, $34.07. My chest tightened. It wasn't just the money. It was the story they'd written, one where I was a distant, transactional sister, not part of the heart, just part of the budget. That night, I left without saying goodbye. Didn't attend the brunch the next morning. I booked an early flight back to New York and spent the entire flight staring out the window, wondering how a family could let you buy their silence and then punish you for not being loud enough. When I called my mother 2 days later, her response was worse than silence. "You always have to make everything about you, Liam," she said. "Maybe if you tried to connect more and compete less, people wouldn't be so distant." And just like that, every bit of generosity turned to ash. That was the day I realized they didn't see me. Not really. They saw a wallet with ambition, not a woman with a heart. And I decided, quietly and completely, that I was done proving anything to them. I didn't go home after the wedding, not home. At least, I didn't call anyone. I didn't text back. I didn't even collect the dress I left hanging in the hotel closet. I boarded my flight to New York on the first available seat out of Charleston and walked straight into my Brooklyn apartment, dropped my bag by the door, and collapsed onto the couch. And I didn't move, not for a while. For 3 weeks, the blinds stayed shut. The city could have burned around me, and I wouldn't have noticed. I didn't check my work phone, didn't respond to HR, though they emailed 5 times. I ignored the Slack pings from my team. I canceled every single meeting on my calendar. I watched the accept and decline buttons flash across my screen for board invites and investor briefings, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. Every inch of me felt hollow, not numb, just emptied, like I had been gutted and no one noticed. I kept replaying Becca's words in my mind, like a cruel mantra. Some people think money buys meaning. The way she paused, how her eyes landed on me across that ballroom like a sniper bullet, the perfect smile stretched across her face, like she believed she was saying something righteous. And Zach, my brother, my blood stood there and let it happen, didn't flinch, didn't step in, didn't protect me. I had paid for half their dream day. I had helped him get through college. I co-signed the loan for his first car. I bought Mom's medical insurance when she lost hers. I sent gifts every birthday and holiday. I picked up tabs without hesitation. I was the family's quiet, invisible safety net. But I was never the daughter, never the sister, never the woman they embraced, only the provider, only when it suited them. I thought back to when Dad left. I was 10. He left with a note and a duffel bag. And I remember standing in the hallway, gripping the door frame while my mom sobbed into her coat sleeve. Everyone fell apart, but someone had to be the adult. I made flashcards to help Zach with school. I cooked dinner for Elise when Mom had double shifts. I never asked for anything. I never cried. It became a pattern. I learned that being useful was the safest way to be loved. And now, 32 years old, I was realizing that kind of love doesn't last. It doesn't protect you. It just uses you until you break. In those days of darkness, my apartment became a cave of silence. I stopped answering the door. I let the food delivery guy leave things on the steps. I lived on cold coffee, string cheese, and the bitter taste of resentment. But grief has a strange way of sharpening things. In the silence, I started hearing myself again. Not the voice that performs in boardrooms or makes small talk with donors. The real voice. The one I've spent years trying to drown under strategy decks and success metrics. It whispered, "You are not their bank account. You are not your quarterly value. You are not the one who needs to apologize." One morning, I think it was a Thursday, I woke up before sunrise. Couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started typing. Not a resume, not a resignation, just truth. The blog post started as a way to process, a way to scream into the void, how we drove 80% revenue growth with a 28-person team in 24 months. I broke it all down, the raw data, the campaign cycles, the testing sequences, the retention formulas, the internal systems I'd built from scratch when no one else had the vision or guts. I added charts, references. I cited our CRM logs. I anonymized client names, but left enough breadcrumbs for the savvy ones. It wasn't just strategy. It was a confession, a testimony, a documentation of my worth that no one could twist or diminish. I didn't promote it. I didn't even tell anyone I was publishing. I just hit post and closed my laptop. That act alone felt like reclaiming a small corner of myself, not to prove anything, but because I was tired of being erased. I also called my financial advisor that day and revoked the monthly transfer I'd been sending Mom, $1,000, $500 every first of the month, without fail for 5 years. No explanation, just end it. Then I drafted an email to Zach. I didn't send it, but I wrote, "You made your choice. I hope the cost was worth the silence." Grief comes in waves, but rage settles. It settles deep, not as fire, but as clarity, the kind that makes you see every instance you were told to be the bigger person. Every time you swallowed hurt because family is complicated. No one ever asked if being the bigger person was killing me slowly. So I stopped. I stopped carrying them, stopped bleeding for their comfort, stopped setting myself on fire just to keep them warm. And for the first time, I wasn't sorry. It started as a whisper, a trickle, a few shares, a couple of reposts, a handful of direct messages, but by the second day, the blog post I wrote in the haze of heartbreak and withdrawal had caught fire. Within 48 hours, it had over 2 million reads. LinkedIn turned into a wildfire of reshares. The article climbed the front page of Hacker News. I woke up to an inbox full of subject lines like, "This changed everything. Are you free for a chat? We need to talk." I wasn't sure what stunned me more, that people were actually reading it, or that they were listening. Forbes published a feature titled, "How One Woman Quietly Carried 80% of a Company's Revenue Until She Was Silenced." Business Insider quoted sections verbatim, highlighting phrases like strategic extraction and undervalued leadership in a masculine structure. But the real shock came in an email that popped up in my inbox 3 days later. The sender's name made my stomach lurch. Jonathan M., Keller Chairman, Apexon Technologies Board of Directors. The email was short, direct, surgical. Miss Carter, we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you regarding the current trajectory of Apexon's enterprise accounts. Certain figures have come to our attention that require clarification. Warm regards, Jonathan Keller. At first, I thought it was bait, or worse, a trap. But curiosity has a way of nudging you past anger. I opened my CRM dashboard, a private one I'd mirrored when I knew something felt off before I was terminated. And there it was. Delta Group. Contract suspended. Nexra Corp. MSA voided pending internal restructuring. Helionet. Renewal stalled. Pending account leadership realignment. That was over $67 million in pipeline revenue, crumbling within 3 weeks of my departure. What they never understood and clearly never bothered to ask was that I wasn't just managing accounts. I was the accounts. I had spent years building those relationships, flying across time zones, memorizing the names of clients' kids, remembering birthdays, closing deals in hospital waiting rooms. I was the reason those contracts stuck. And now, they were slipping fast. 3 days after the email, I received a phone call. The name Hunter S. flashed on my screen. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. The next day, he tried again. I let it go to voicemail. He called a third time, this time from a private number. I finally picked up. "Liam, hi," he began, his tone overly rehearsed, like someone who had practiced in front of a mirror. I didn't speak. Silence is powerful. "I wanted to see if you might be open to a conversation." He continued, cautiously, "Perhaps we can discuss a way forward. The board has some concerns and, well, I think it would be helpful if we reset expectations." I took a breath, then said evenly, "Not unless it's in front of the board." He didn't reply right away. I imagined him pinching the bridge of his nose. "I'm sure we can find a more private channel." I repeated it, sharper now. "Not unless it's in front of the board." That was the end of that call. 2 days later, I found myself flying first class to San Francisco. Apexon's headquarters stood like a glass titan in the financial district. I wore a sleek navy suit, minimal jewelry. No makeup let them focus on the work, not the packaging. The boardroom was exactly as I remembered it. Cold, expansive, filled with people who once glanced past me like I was air. This time, they looked directly at me. Jonathan Keller stood as I entered. "Miss Carter, thank you for agreeing to meet with us." I nodded, placed a thick folder on the table, and connected my laptop to the display. "I won't waste your time," I began. "This is a detailed account of the enterprise revenue structure I built and led for 3 fiscal years. This includes signed contracts, renewal history, and risk reports I submitted before I was terminated." Hunter shifted in his seat. I clicked through the slides, speaking clearly but without emotion. I let the facts do the talking. 180s, 2 million generated in 2023 alone. Retention rate, 94%. Client satisfaction scores, 410 average. Year-over-year growth, 118%. Then I showed what had happened in my absence. Loss of Delta's renewal, 22 million. Pending exit of Nexra 18 or 7 million. Internal account team turnover, 5 resignations. I could see their faces tighten, not just surprise, alarm. Jonathan leaned forward. Why weren't we aware of this exposure? Hunter's face flushed. These numbers weren't part of the transition documentation. I cut him off, because I wasn't given the opportunity to present any transition. I was escorted out of the building with 0 notice. More silence, that kind of thick, nervous quiet that settles over a room like smoke. Carter, another board member, spoke, Catherine Lynn, who had never so much as acknowledged me in a hallway. What would it take for you to return? There it was, the twist, the reversal. I stared at her, then at the rest of them. I thought of the wedding, the sting of Becca's words, my brother's silence, my mother's voice asking me why I always had to compete. Then I thought of the younger version of me, the one who kept pushing because she thought if she just worked hard enough, they'd finally clap. And I said, I don't want to return. Hunter exhaled, almost relieved. But I wasn't done. I'm not interested in repairing what you broke, but I am building something new, and I have no doubt I'll be competing with Apexon within the next 12 months. Hunter's eyes narrowed. You're threatening us. No, I said. Calm. I'm warning you. You don't understand value until it walks out the door and takes your future with it. And then I packed my laptop, nodded at the board, and walked out, heels echoing, spine straight, not looking back. Outside, I took a breath that felt like it belonged to someone who had just been born. That night, I posted a single line on LinkedIn. Sometimes the best seat at the table is the one you build yourself. And I slept, for the first time in months. I slept through the night. It took me another week to fly back to Charlotte, not because I wanted to, but because it felt necessary. Closure isn't something that always arrives gently. It's something you sometimes have to demand, even when it feels like you've already outgrown the room you're walking into. The house looked the same, white porch swing, weathered steps, hydrangeas half dead in the front garden, the ghosts of 1,000 small hurts still clinging to the walls. I walked in without knocking. My mother was sitting in her favorite chair, crocheting something she'd never finish. The TV was on, muted, a Hallmark movie flickering in the background. She didn't look up when I walked in. Back from California, she asked flatly. Back from being underestimated, I replied. She sighed. You always were dramatic. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle, then walked into the kitchen. Zach was there. He turned when he heard the door creak. His face was tight, uncertain. You didn't call, he said. You didn't stop your wife from humiliating me, I replied. A beat of silence passed between us, heavy, bitter. He leaned against the counter. Look, Liam, it was her day. Becca was stressed. Things came out wrong. She insulted me in front of 280 people. Zach, I said, voice calm but edged, and you let her. She didn't mean. She did. I cut him off. She meant it, every word. She wanted to remind me that no matter how much I contribute, I'll never be family the way she defines it. He opened his mouth to argue, but I kept going. You know how much I paid for your wedding. He blinked. I know you helped. 30s, 475s, 12, to be exact. Venue, bar, photographer, favors, earrings, all of it. Not a thank you, not a mention. And then she took a shot at me in front of everyone like I was the help who overstayed their welcome. He looked down. I didn't realize. No, you didn't, I said, because you never had to. I've spent my life stepping up, covering rent when Mom lost her job, buying your car, helping with Elise's student loans, quietly, without ever making a scene. And the one time I needed you to have my back, you stayed silent. Zach rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. I'm sorry. I don't want your apology. I said, I want you to understand this. I'm done. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your ATM. I'm not the one who has to overextend herself to feel worthy. He didn't respond. He didn't know how. He looked smaller in that kitchen than I had ever seen him. My mother finally came in. She held a cup of tea like a prop in a poorly written play. You're really cutting us off, she asked, her voice quieter than I'd expected. I'm setting boundaries. I said, it's long overdue. We're your family. No, I said gently. You're my relatives. Family shows up when it matters. You didn't. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. I've built something that matters. I continued, and I won't let it be diminished by people who only see me as valuable when I'm useful to them. I'm not here to be accepted anymore. I'm here to be whole. There was silence, deep, cavernous silence, the kind that only comes when people realize they've run out of excuses. You've changed, she said finally. I've healed. I corrected. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside was a document, ending the automatic $500 monthly transfer I'd been sending for 5 years. This stops now. You're going to need to figure out how to live without my sacrifice. My mother didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stood there, hollowed out by the realization that the scaffolding she never acknowledged was being dismantled. I wish you told me how unhappy you were, she said. I did, I replied, just not in words you cared to hear. I left the envelope on the table, kissed my fingers, touched the door frame on my way out like I used to when I was a child. Outside, the air felt different. Crisper, cleaner. For the first time in my life, I wasn't tethered to their validation. I wasn't waiting to be invited back into a house where I never fully belonged. I was free. I moved to Lisbon in late spring, the kind of move people fantasize about but rarely follow through with. I booked a one-way ticket, sold most of my furniture, and sublet my Brooklyn apartment to a startup intern named Camila, who reminded me of a younger, hungrier version of myself. My new apartment sits just a few blocks from the ocean, tucked above a pastel-tiled cafe that sells the strongest espresso I've ever had. The mornings smell like salt and sugar and fresh pavement. At night, I fall asleep to the rhythm of water licking the shore, like it's been waiting for me all along. I used the remainder of my stock options, what was left after taxes and the fallout, to fund a new venture, a seed-stage investment fund, focused entirely on women-led startups, not just glossy, headline-ready companies, but real, gritty, brilliant women who'd been overlooked by the same systems that nearly buried me. I named the fund Found Her. I don't lead with titles anymore. I don't walk into rooms needing to be the loudest or the smartest or the one who saved the deal. These days, I listen more. I coach. I write. I host weekly roundtables with founders from around the world. Sometimes we talk strategy. Sometimes we talk survival. Mostly, we talk about how tired we all are of performing strength instead of being seen. I teach yoga on Tuesdays at a tiny studio near the harbor, not because I'm qualified, really, but because I needed something to anchor my breath. And the studio owner offered me the spot after one long conversation about burnout. I start each class with one question. What are you letting go of today? My mother still calls once a week, usually on Sundays. We talk about the weather. Sometimes she sends me links to crocheted cardigan patterns or forwards family photos from gatherings I no longer attend. One Sunday, not long ago, she asked, "Do you ever get lonely over there, by yourself?" I stared out at the Atlantic. There was a sailboat far off, slicing the water clean. Part of me wanted to say yes, because loneliness is real, even in paradise, even when you've escaped what once held you. But another part of me, deeper, older, wiser, knew better. No, I said, not the kind of lonely I used to feel. I used to think I needed their recognition, that if I just achieved more, gave more, showed up more, they'd finally see me, that somehow love was transactional, conditional, something to be earned. But that's not love. That's survival wrapped in sacrifice. And I'm done surviving for people who only see me when they need something. I don't know if my family will ever change. I don't know if they understand what they lost when they chose comfort over truth, appearances over accountability. I'm learning that forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the same role in someone's story. Sometimes forgiveness means writing a new story entirely, one where you're no longer the one bending. Some days, I still feel the echo of who I used to be, the woman who filled rooms with results and still left feeling empty, the daughter who overgave, the sister who went unseen. But those echoes fade with every sunrise that greets me without demand, without judgment, without condition. Maybe this is what freedom really looks like, not perfection, not applause, but peace. So now I ask you, how many of us are still shrinking ourselves to fit inside rooms that were never built for us? How many of us stay quiet, compliant, present just to prove we belong, even when the cost is our very selves? And when is the last time you asked, not what others expect of you, but what you expect of yourself? You don't need permission to choose yourself. You don't need to be needed to be worthy. You don't need to be small to be loved. You are allowed to walk out of any place, any role, Any relationship that asks you to be less than who you are. And if you've already walked out, like I did, maybe this is your reminder that you don't owe anyone an apology for that. Because sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is belong to ourselves.